Hello everyone. In this video we will learn how to deploy Django to a VPS. Here I already have a public repository on GitHub for the sample project that will be used. I have created the steps with a README in this project repository. For you who need the deployment guide in text form, so it will be easier to copy and paste the commands from the video. This project uses django-environ for environment variable management, then uses PostgreSQL as the database. We use Gunicorn as the WSGI/HTTP server for production. So make sure you install Gunicorn as a dependency because the project I use is still synchronous. Next I will choose a VPS package. I will use a provider that supports my country. You can purchase it from another provider you prefer. Choose a server location close to your user base to minimize latency. Then I choose Ubuntu 24 as the VPS operating system. Here we are asked to create a root password. I will just generate a random password, then don't forget to save the password. Then we create an SSH key to make it easier for us to use SSH later. Just copy this command and paste it into the terminal. Also make sure your computer already supports SSH. Just replace that part with your email. We just use the default location to save the key. Then for the passphrase, just leave it empty by pressing enter. Next we need to copy the public key from the file. Scroll up in the terminal to see the location of the public key file that was created earlier. We open it with VS Code and copy, then paste the public key. For the name, I just fill it with the email. For the next section, here I only choose the default option and do not add automatic daily backup. If you want to use it, there will be an additional cost. I will choose the cheapest VPS package. Then for the duration, only 1 month. You can choose a package according to your needs. Next we process the payment for the selected VPS package. After payment, we wait until the VPS dashboard setup process is complete. Then we just click to open the dashboard. Just close it if a survey pop-up appears like this. On this dashboard we can see various information about the VPS we bought. Just copy the SSH command to access the VPS via SSH in the terminal. The first time accessing SSH to the VPS, it will see the fingerprint. We type yes, then just press enter. I will just use the CMD terminal to access the SSH. Next I will install astral, because I use it as a dependency manager in this project. If you use something else, such as poetry, you can install it. I use astral because it is very fast and lightweight. I got this installation command from astral documentation. Adjust this command with the dependency manager you use in your project. After installing it, we are advised to reopen SSH so that astral is detected in the VPS terminal. So I exit SSH, then reconnect to SSH. OK, astral has been successfully installed. Now we move to the var www folder. Generally, this folder is already available by default, but for some reason in this VPS the www folder does not exist. Therefore, I will manually create the www folder. If your VPS already has the www folder, then you don't need to follow this step, because I will create the folder and give access to the user. With this command, I create the missing www folder, then give ownership to the current user, which is the root user. Next, we move to the var www folder. Then clone your project repository. Here I use a public repository on GitHub. If your repository is private, then you need to prepare a GitHub token to successfully clone the repository. After successfully cloning the repository, we move into the project folder that was cloned earlier. Then we install the dependencies used by the project. I already installed UV earlier, so now I will install the dependencies with UV. If you use something other than UV, make sure when you install the dependencies, they are located inside the .venv virtual environment folder. Then activate the virtual environment. Next, I will prepare some environment variables in the .env file. I use django-environ as the environment variable manager. If you don't use that or use another package, you can configure it. The point is we configure the settings in the settings.py file. I have created a env example file that contains an example of environment variables that can be configured. So on the VPS terminal I just copy the env example file into a .env file. Then I edit the environment variables with nano. If you don't use environment variable management like this, then you can directly edit the settings.py file with nano, although using no environment variables is highly discouraged. Here I set debug to false. Then for allowed hosts, which is a list, I fill it with my VPS IP address because I don't use a domain. Fill in your domain if you have one for this project. You can set it directly in the settings.py file if you don't use django-environ. Then for secret key I will use Python in the versus code terminal. You can follow the command I run in the terminal for the line with blue text. Or you can generate random characters with another method as you need. I copy the random characters, then paste the secret key into the .env file on the SSH terminal. The database configuration will be done later after installing PostgreSQL. For now we save it with Ctrl+S, then exit nano with Ctrl+X. Next we will create a service for our project. This is done so that our project can run even if we leave the SSH connection. Here I create the service with my project name, you adjust it with your project name. I already have a sample service file for this project, just need to edit it. First I edit the service description, then replace the word example project with the name of the project folder cloned with git. Point the working directory to our project folder. Then for the environment make sure it points to the virtual environment folder such as .venv. Then we run the WSGI HTTP server with Gunicorn and bind it to a socket. For the user of the service it is root. Then use the www data group which usually already exists by default. You can adjust this service file with what is in your VPS. Then for Gunicorn, I have already added it as a project dependency, so it is already installed. Make sure you have added Gunicorn to your project dependencies and installed it. Then for config WSGI, this is the path to your project's WSGI file, so you need to change the word config to the folder where the WSGI file is located. The folder is the same as where the settings.py file is located. Once you finish editing the service file, save with Ctrl+S, then exit nano with Ctrl+X. Next, we create a symbolic link for our project Nginx configuration. For the Nginx configuration file name, I usually use the project domain name, but since I don't use a domain for this project, I use the VPS IP address. If you have a domain for the project, you can use that domain as the file name. After creating the symbolic link, we edit the content with nano. I already have a sample Nginx configuration file. For example.com, you can replace it with your domain if you have one. Since I don't use a domain, I just fill it with the VPS IP address. Then project name is replaced with the name of the project folder we cloned. For proxy pass, it matches the bind socket we set in the service file earlier. Then here I also make media and static file links served through Nginx. If your project uses static files like HTML, CSS or user-uploaded files like media, then you need to add them in settings.py. Make sure you have added them. We adjust the proxy pass. Once finished editing, save with Ctrl+S, then exit nano with Ctrl+X. The next step is to create a certificate for HTTPS with certbot. Please replace example.com with your domain if you have one. I don't use a domain for this project, so I can't create the HTTPS certificate. Certbot is usually already installed, but if your VPS doesn't have it, then you need to install it first. After you run certbot to create the HTTPS certificate, the Nginx configuration file for your project will change. But since I don't use it, my Nginx configuration file stays the same. Then we reload Nginx. The next step, we need to install the database used by our project. I use PostgreSQL as the database. If you use another database, then you need to install it first. To be able to install the latest version of PostgreSQL, I need to update the apt repository by adding the PostgreSQL repository. wget and ca certificates are usually already installed, but if your VPS doesn't have them, then you need to install them. Here, after I add the PostgreSQL repository, I update with apt. After updating, I install PostgreSQL version 16. After installing the database, the next step is to create a database user and database for the project. I use PostgreSQL, so the SQL statements here are valid for PostgreSQL. If you use another database, then you need to adjust the SQL statements to create the database user and database for your project. I replace the word your DB with my project name deploy Django with an underscore, not a dash. I just paste the statements into PSQL one by one. Once done, we can exit PSQL. After creating the database, next we need to configure the database in the environment variable. I use django-environ to handle the environment variables in the .env file. If you don't use it, you can edit settings.py and put the configuration in that file. We enter the database name, then the database username, and the password. The database host is localhost because we install the database on the same server. For PostgreSQL, the default port is 5432. For user, password, and database name, it matches what we created earlier. If you use another database, then you need to adjust it. Once finished editing, save with Ctrl+S, then exit Nano with Ctrl+X. Next, we migrate the database with Django to match the models in our project. Then we need to run Collectstatic for the HTML and CSS. Now we enable our Django project service with system control. Just follow this command in your VPS terminal and adjust the service name with the one you created. Once done, please open your website with a browser. In this project I didn't create any pages, therefore the home page is not found. I will just open the admin page. To be able to log into the admin account, we need to create the account first with Django in our VPS terminal. Enter the admin account credentials if you want to use Django's admin dashboard. I will just create the account as an example. Okay, since we managed to log in, that means our Django website is working normally. Note that my website does not support HTTPS because I did not run certbot earlier. But if you already have a domain and have run certbot, then your website should run with HTTPS, not HTTP like mine. If you haven't run it yet, just replace this example.com with your domain. Then just reload Nginx. Next is to set up auto-deploy to VPS when there is a new commit on the main branch. This step is optional. If you want auto-deploy with GitHub workflow, you can follow this step, but if you don't want to, that's fine too because your website is already running well. In this deploy YML script, we need several secrets that need to be added to the project repository on GitHub. VPS host is the VPS IP address. Then for VPS user we use root as already shown on the VPS dashboard. Then for VPS SSH key it is in a file on our computer, because we already configured the SSH key the first time we wanted to connect to the VPS via SSH. Here I use Windows PowerShell. First we move to the directory where SSH stores the key. Then we open the private key file. Make sure you open the correct file. This file name matches what you set when you first set up the SSH key. Once done, just copy and paste into GitHub. Okay, earlier we prepared the credentials so GitHub workflow can access our VPS via SSH. Now we need to set up the deploy key. This deploy key is needed so Git on our VPS server can access the project repository on our GitHub. Just follow the command I type, but change words like deploy Django with your project name. For the passphrase just leave it empty, press enter. Then we copy the public key to GitHub. After creating the deploy key on GitHub, we just need to set up our VPS to access our project repository. We give access to the key with chmod. Next we edit the SSH configuration on the VPS with nano. I already have an example configuration for SSH. I use the alias host deploy Django for github.com. This is to make it easier in case you have several projects on the same VPS. So the GitHub repositories do not conflict. Save with Ctrl+S, then exit nano with Ctrl+X. Then we set the remote repository address with your repository address, but github.com is replaced with the alias in the SSH configuration earlier. Then we scan github.com so it enters known host. Then we test the connection. If successful, the output is the same as mine. Okay, now let's try rerunning the GitHub workflow for deployment, or you can push a commit to the main branch to test it. Okay, it worked. The auto deploy workflow is running normally. Make sure you edit the word deploy Django in this workflow to your project name. That's all our video this time about deploying Django on VPS. If you have any questions, you can ask them in the comments column. See you.